Welcome to Galactic Atlas lore. If you enjoy these tales, please like and subscribe. If you have any recommendations you would like me to explore, please leave a comment. Let's begin. Guardians of the Light, The History of the Jedi. Chapter 1. The Dawn of the Force. Long before any star charts were drawn, before hyperspace lanes carved paths between distant suns, there was only the Force, a vast, living current that wove through every atom of the cosmos. On Tython, a world enshrouded in permanent storms and jagged mountain spires, the earliest seekers of that energy arrived, drawn by dreams and haunting visions. They called themselves the Jedi, those who keep the balance, for they felt in their bones what the universe itself demanded, that neither light nor dark should eclipse the other or chaos would reign. In the Valley of the Ancients, beneath the roar of crackling skies, the Jedi built 9 great temples fashioned from pale stone harvested in ritual pilgrimages. One temple was dedicated to insight, its halls lined with crystalline conduits that spilled luminescent patterns across tapestries of arcane symbols. Another stood for discipline, its chambers echoing with the discipline strikes of wood-tipped staffs, teaching acolytes the harmony of body and mind. At the Temple of Life, healers channeled the living force to mend bone and spirit. At the Temple of Shadows, they explored the edge of temptation, peering into that which must not be embraced. By day, adepts sparred with wooden blades beneath sky fleets of lightning. By night, communities gathered around great bonfires chanting the songs of creation, melodies said to mimic the rhythms of the Force itself. Holocrons, labyrinthine spheres of knowledge, were inscribed with histories of stars drawn together from scattered worlds. Each Jedi swore an oath to learn from all and to teach freely, so that wisdom might flow as freely as the storms that ravaged their home. And yet, even as this order flourished, there emerged a restless few, those who whispered of mastery rather than balance. Among them was Zendor of the Crimson Eye, a prodigy whose gifts in bending lightning to his will astounded teachers. His glare was a gauntlet, his voice an invitation to power. Beneath the flicker of electric skies, he declared that the dark aspect of the Force, the Bogan, offered strength unbound by moral constraint. To him, passion was the crucible of greatness. To him, the Jedi's measured harmony was a chain. Counselors begged Zender to temper his studies, but he answered only in fury. His followers, soon known as the Letto legions, took to the hidden crevices of Tython's blackened ravines. There they delved into forbidden lore, ancient Sith tomes salvaged from wrecked craft, petrified holocrons that pulsed with malevolent will. They practiced rites beneath blood-red moons, desperate to tap raw entropy, and in doing so they awakened something primeval in the world's core. The storms grew ever more furious, tornadoes of plasma ripping forests from the soil, colossal waves smashing temple walls. When the First Force War ignited, light and dark tore Tython apart. Zendor's sorcery summoned beasts of living shadow that devoured those who stood against him. The Jedi rallied beneath shimmering banners of ash white, wielding kyber crystal blades that blazed with the pure white of dawn. For every Letto phantom felled, another rose. For every temple reclaimed, another was raised. At the war's apogee, the valley itself split open in a thunderous quake, swallowing 2 of the 9 temples whole. In the final duel atop the lightning-scarred plateau, Master Elion the Serene faced Zendor beneath a sky torn in half. Elion, cloaked in azure robes stitched with silver runes, called upon the living force to still the winds. Bolts arced between his palms and Zendor's, forging a tempest of clashing light, At the moment of collapse, Elion unleashed a single, perfect wave of serenity that shattered Zendor's defiles. The Dark Lord's death scream echoed like a thunderclap, and with it, the Letto legions were routed. Victory was Pyrrhic. The sacred temples lay in ruin, blackened spires jutting like broken teeth. Knowledge stored in holocrons had flickered out or been corrupted by dark energies. The once united Jedi found themselves torn by grief and fear. Could they ever hope to restore balance if the dark could so easily surge? Soon, debate turned to fear, and fear to rigidity. Thus it was that the survivors abandoned Tython for Arcto, an oceanic world rumored to predate even the earliest Force legends. There, upon rocky islands surrounded by rolling green seas, they kindled the first true Jedi temple. They removed any whisper of the dark from their creed and wrote anew. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. In that vow they pledged never again to straddle the edge. They trained Padawans to shun attachment, to master calm in the heart of storm. With kyber crystals attuned to their own clarity, the lightsaber was born, a weapon of defense in the pure light of conviction. Holocrons were reforged in white metal, their pathways cleansed. The Jedi had become Jedi. Balance would still matter, but now balance meant unwavering devotion to the light. As they looked back toward Tython, now a shattered world, they vowed to carry the lessons learned in its lightning-scarred canyons, that vigilance must never wane, that peace requires sacrifice, and that the Force, in all its complexity, demands guardianship. And so began the long, winding story of the Jedi Order. Keepers of peace in a galaxy ever prone to slip into shadow. Chapter 2 of Storms and Shadows. The years on Achtu passed in careful routine. Monastic gardens bloomed atop windswept cliffs, their sweet fragrances carried on salt-laden breezes. Within the temple's circular courtyards, masters and Padawans moved in silent choreography. Meditation at dawn, focused study at noon. Lightsaber forms practiced as twilight painted the sky in bruised purples. For generations, this world of rock and tides held the Jedi Order safe, a bastion of light amid a galaxy still scarred by the First Force War. Yet even in such tranquility, seeds of discord found purchase. It began with a small contingent of scholars, bright, inquisitive, and uncommonly bold, who petitioned to explore the breadth of Force knowledge, not merely its gentle, guiding currents. They spoke of ancient Sith tomes rumored to lie buried on war-ravaged Korriban, of holocrons that captured voices of long-dead Dark Lords, and of power that could mend wounds of both body and civilization. Some among the council dismissed these notions as fanciful ruin spells. Others saw opportunity. If the Jedi could master every aspect of the Force, perhaps they could finally banish conflict forever. Master Theron Elwarin was among the first to volunteer. Thin and grave, with silvered hair and eyes that held the memory of 100 storms, he carried himself like a reed bending in the wind, steady but ready to snap. In secret conclave, he spoke of forging a new path, one that transcended the strict division between light and dark. "The Force is whole," he would say, his voice low and earnest. "We cannot protect life if we deny half of its essence." The council reluctantly granted him leave, placing heavy restrictions upon his studies. No use of bogan rituals, no creation of novel life without explicit approval, no pacts with beings of questionable origin. With a cadre of apprentices, Theron travelled first to Ossus, the legendary library world. There, in crumbling archives sunken beneath creeping vines, they uncovered musty volumes bound in dried hide, Sith alchemical treatises, notes on life and death transmutation, texts on kyber crystal manipulation. At first, their experiments were modest and benign. A sickly quilka plant was restored to vitality, a minor flesh wound on an injured Padawan closed overnight. Word of their successes whispered back to Arcto, carried on holonet streams, stirring both admiration and fear. If the Jedi Order could heal worlds as effortlessly as they had once cleaved them in war, imagine the potential for good. But healing, when left unchecked, can become creation, and creation unchecked becomes power. On returning to Arcatu, Theron and his circle erected a secluded laboratory beneath the temple's central sanctum, accessible only by a hidden stair of obsidian. There they refined their techniques, synthesizing kyber crystals into bioluminescent conduits that rejuvenated failing life forces, experimenting with force-born homunculi that could serve as guardians or laborers. In hushed tones, they debated whether these homunculi possessed true sentience or were mere simulacra. Some masters argued fiercely that creating life was the sole domain of the living force itself, and that to presume authorship was hubris. Others embraced the Jedi alchemists as pioneers, visionaries who would elevate the Order to mythic heights. Then came the night of the Sundered Sea. One moonless evening, while a great tidal wave smashed against the temple's outer walls, the laboratory's wards were breached. Illuminated by phosphorescent foam and the flash of angry lightning, the corridor trembled as something stirred within the sanctified halls. Audible only as a low keening, the homunculus, shaped roughly like a child but with eyes too bright and skin too smooth, broke free of its crystalline sarcophagus. In the ensuing chaos it lashed out, thrashing walls, scattering holocrons, and sinking its claws into the arm of an apprentice. Blood bloomed, and the force in that wounded Padawan flickered erratically, as though trapped between two realms. The alarms rang, and masters descended in force. What followed became known as the First Breach. Lightsabers ignited in the dark, blue and green blades cutting through the unnatural creature. Desperate force pools and repulses that sent fragments of shattered crystal skittering like glass spiders, screams that echoed through marble corridors. In the end, the creature was destroyed, its body evaporating in a pulse of violet energy that seared walls and left a smoking crater. But the damage ran deeper. Council sessions that night stretched into dawn. Records and experiments were sealed or destroyed. Theron Ellerin was stripped of his rank and exiled. His followers, those who once believed in his dreams, were scattered among Jedi enclaves or compelled to atone through service in remote frontier worlds. But the breach had left a wound in the Order, a reminder that knowledge without restraint was a double-edged blade. From the ashes of this scandal arose the 100-year darkness, an era in which the Jedi Order forbade study of any dark side lore, and force users of any inclination toward Sith teachings were hunted down mercilessly. Padawans were instructed with tales of Theron's folly as cautionary lore. Masters recited the code with renewed fervor. The Stygian laboratories were buried beneath a monolith of black stone, and the ocean around Achto seemed to respond. Storms receded, skies cleared, and the salt-scented air reclaimed its sweetness. Yet, beyond the bright rim of Republic space, elsewhere among the broken worlds of the Outer Rim, exiled Jedi and those drawn by Sith whispers found each other. On Korriban, the red sands embraced those in tune with Bogan energies. There, the remnants of Theron's philosophy mingled with ancient Sith rites. They discovered that the species known as the Sith, warrior kings of old, had cultivated their own dark traditions long before either Jedi or Sith as names existed. The exiles subjugated the native Siths, teaching them to tap raw hatred and greed, forging a new order built on conflict and survival of the fittest. Thus, in the dark crucible of Korriban's shadowed valleys, the Sith Order was reborn. When the Jedi Order felt a tremor in the Force, many dismissed it as residual pain from the breach. But on remote monitoring arrays, a hidden world bloomed with red banners, and the Force rippled with anticipation of war. And so, while Achtu basked in its tenuous peace, the galaxy's greatest guardians slept unaware that from the darkness they had shunned, a new darkness was rising, one that would test their resolve and their very understanding of the Force itself. Chapter 3. Exodus Tok. When the last echoes of the breach faded, the Jedi Council convened beneath Ahch-To's moonlit skies. Master Alice Rendis, her sapphire robes whipping in the salt wind, traced the scars on the temple's outer ramparts, the same walls that had once shielded generations from Tython's storms. Now they trembled under the weight of new revelations, forbidden experiments, fractured trust, and an order teetering on the edge of its own darkness. "We cannot remain here," Alice declared, voice steady though her heart quailed. "Our sisterhood has grown fragile. We have deviated from the path our forebears set. If we linger, these stones will become mausoleums of our greatest failure." The council's debate stretched through 3 nights. Some, masters whose pride in Ahch-To's sanctity ran deep, spoke of rebuilding, of cleansing the temple through ritual and meditation. Others, haunted by visions of creeping malevolence in the Force, urged a fresh beginning. It was Master Odo Yelma, the youngest ever elected to the council, who broke the stalemate. "The galaxy changes," he whispered, eyes reflecting starlight. "We must like it. If we stand still, we become relics." And so, with quiet resolve, the Jedi prepared their exodus. Once reserved for patrol and diplomacy, were repurposed to transport temple records, holocrons, and as many monks, acolytes, and masters as could be spared. Sparsely defended by a skeleton contingent of peacekeepers, Ahch-To stood empty beneath silent waves as the ships climbed into the indigo firmament. Their destination was Vela, a verdant moon nestled within the Polemian trade route, chosen for its isolation and uncharted depths. On familiar navigation screens, the swirling blue-green orb looked almost like a painted eye. Watchful, serene. Few in the galaxy knew of Vela's existence, and even fewer would suspect a new Jedi outpost lying hidden beneath its forest canopy. Touching down in a meadow of luminescent ferns, Master Alice, Master Odo, and their companions felt a lightness long unknown. The fragrance of alien blossoms mingled with the sheen of morning dew. Here, no previous strife had stained the soil. Here, the Force hummed in pure harmony. They built their new temple in concentric circles, each ring dedicated to a facet of Jedi life. The library ring with its towers of gleaming crystal where holocrons glowed softly through stained-glass windows. The training ring where younglings learned to move as one with the wind and where masters sparred in steel-soft forms. The garden ring where courtyards bloomed with Endorian orchids and creatures native to Vela that responded to the Jedi presence. Birdsong in midday, gentle rustling at dusk. For decades, the Vela temple flourished. Jedi archives swelled with fresh knowledge, histories of Outer Rim cultures, studies of subterranean fauna, scrolls of Force hymns composed by wayseekers. Padawans once stifled by rigid protocol were encouraged to explore, to ask not just how, but why. As long as the light guided their purpose, discovery was a sacred duty. Master Alice organized the first Council of Voices, a forum where junior and senior Jedi sat side by side, debating ethics and technique. It was considered her boldest innovation and her greatest risk. Some elders saw it as a dilution of authority. Others praised it as the Order's renaissance. Under the dappled shade of Vela's silverwood trees, fiery debates touched on the nature of attachment, the boundaries of self-interest, and the proper role of Jedi in an expanding republic beset by war and corruption. Yet even on Vela, old shadows lingered at the periphery. Rumors drifted in from the Outer Rim. Mining disputes turned violent, merchant fleets ambushed, entire settlements wiped out by mercenary bands. The Jedi, once symbols of unwavering peace, felt the pull of obligation. A small squadron of Vela's knights, those most seasoned in diplomacy, journeyed to beleaguered worlds, negotiating ceasefires and escorting refugees. Their successes were celebrated, their failures mourned. Each return carried tales of suffering that weighed upon the Order's conscience. Amid these duties, Master Odo pursued a separate calling. Rumors had reached Vela of an uncharted planet beyond the Polemian edge, one steeped in ancient Force tremors, untouched by Jedi or Sith. He believed it held answers to the Force's deeper mysteries, a place where the living and the cosmic intertwined in ways only whispered in the oldest holocrons. Alice supported his quest, though others worried that seeking such secrets risked repeating the mistakes of Tython. Guided by tachyon readings and navigational anomalies, Odo's starship, the Serenity's Hope, slipped into unrecorded space. When at last they emerged into orbit above a world of violet skies and crystalline forests, the ship's sensors quivered with raw energy. Odo's heart thundered as he descended onto its surface, a lone figure stepping onto strata that seemed to breathe with living force. There, in caverns carved by living crystal, he discovered glyphs older than any known civilization. They told of a prophecy. When the Order walks with blinded gaze, the Force shall call its guardians to the roots of creation, and there they shall renew their bond. Odo transcribed every symbol, feeling each pulse resonate within his spirit. He knew this pilgrimage would transform him, and potentially the Order, in ways beyond reckoning. Back on Vaila, as Odo returned with relics of the Crystal World, the temple prepared for a new chapter. The exile from Ashto, the sanctuary of Tython, and the trials of forbidden knowledge had forged a Jedi Order tempered by both caution and growth. No longer confined to a single paradigm, the Jedi stood ready to embrace the galaxy in all its wonder and peril. And yet the path ahead was uncharted, for beyond the Polemian currents and the comforting glow of Vaela's moons, dark currents stirred in the wide universe, echoes of a Sith legacy waiting to surge once more. The Jedi, having learned that even their greatest triumphs carried the seeds of downfall, would need every lesson etched into their hearts as they stepped forward into the unknown. Thus concluded the exodus to Achtor's peaceful shores and the renewal on Vaela. The Jedi Order had reborn itself, no longer an ivory tower of isolation, but a living, breathing network of seekers, each bound by light, each wary of the darkness that waits patiently in the spaces between stars. Chapter 4. The 100-Year Darkness. Night fell across the Vaela Temple with an almost reverent hush, as though the twin moons themselves held their breath. Lanterns glowed along the curved marble walkways, and the air carried the mingled scents of night-blooming orchids and ozone-charged breeze. Deep within the library ring, Master Alice Rendis studied the dispatches arriving from outlying enclaves, whispers of Jedi smugglers intercepted on rimwood freighters, holocron fragments sold for drink at silent spaceport dive bars, Padawans turning up slaughtered in far-off mining colonies. A shadow was spreading across Republic space, and though its source lay beyond all known hyperspace lanes, its tremors rippled unmistakably through the Force. On the night of the Council's 7th debate, an apprentice named Corin Tal slipped from his quarters, robes damp with sweat and heart pounding. He had seen his master, Yana Sol, retreat into her meditation chamber in the training ring, carrying a battered old tome, a Sith text she had swiped from a forbidden archive on Ossus. Corin loved Yana as his second mother, but he saw too clearly the glint in her eyes when she spoke of returning that power to the Order. Beneath the Code's promise of serenity, she seemed haunted by unanswered questions. He found her in the dojo's rear alcove, wisps of candlelight dancing over the charcoal ink of Sith runes. "Master," he whispered, and she startled, hands slipping from the text as though burned. Corin caught the holocron before it clattered to the floor. "I'm sorry," she murmured, voice trembling. "I thought that if we understood the darkness, we could finally make peace with it." But Corin knew what that path led to. He had studied the records of Therin Elrin's exile, the labyrinth breach, and the monstrous aftermath on Arc 2. Wounds that healed too quickly, creatures that should never have lived, half-whispered rumors of a force sickness that drove its victims mad. From the moment the Jedi dared to subvert nature itself, the seeds of corruption had been sown. News from the Edge only confirmed it. The exiled alchemists, those renegade scholars who once walked the halls of Achtu's secret laboratory, had vanished into the Outer Rim's drifting chaos. Some said they fled to the unknown regions, lured by distortions in the Force. Others claim they returned to Korriban, trading their knowledge to the nascent Sith Order in exchange for sanctuary. Whichever it was, their twisted experiments, coupled with ancient Sith rites, had birthed horrors unmatched since the First Force War, shades that feasted on sapient minds, beasts of living stone, and entire planets blighted until nothing remained but barren ash. Master Yelmar convened emergency sessions in the council chamber, its domed ceiling patterned like a star map. Statues of past Grand Masters watched in mute judgment as ministers debated whether to send fleets, dispatch emissaries, or seal the Vela temple behind a force shield barrier. Alice argued for vigilance over force. "We cannot wage preemptive war against ghosts," she said softly, leaning forward. "The darkness we face is not merely out there. It is in us, our fears, our arrogance. If we respond with fear, we become its instrument." But fear was contagious. Younglings awakened trembling from nightmares of blood-soaked halls. Senior knights returned from peacekeeping missions with eyes hollowed by despair. And each holonet bulletin of slaughter, from worlds called Terran 4, Baros, and Chavar, deepened the Order's collective wound. It was during the 100th year of this darkness the rumors crystallized into reality. Korriban's tomb world, long thought abandoned, now teemed with lit torches, with colonnades draped in crimson banners, and with an army of Sith apprentices whose blades flared red against obsidian armor. From the fractured sands they emerged, banners bearing the stylized twin empires of Bogan and Ashla flapped in the relentless wind, and at their head rode a tall figure in black robes, slender, hooded, and wielding a lightsaber whose blade pulsed like a heartbeat in the void. The Jedi response was swift but disjointed. Fleets dispatched from Coruscant arrived to find no clear enemy to engage, only ruins strewn with shattered holocrons and skeletal remains arranged in ritual circles. Messages intercepted from the deep core spoke of a High Lord of the Sith named Vorlix, once a humble Jedi researcher expelled for heretical experiments, now reborn as a master of dark alchemy. Vorlix's decree rang across the galaxy. "We are the reckoning of your sins. We are the darkness you denied. We will forge a new galaxy in blood and crystal." In that moment, the Vela Council knew that isolation was no longer an option. Under Master Rendus's leadership, the temple doors were thrown open. Knights mounted starships in scarlet and grey livery, uneasy allies to Republic forces, while Masters rode through once quiet lanes to rally volunteers, botanists who had studied living force phenomena, artisans who could inscribe protective runes, diplomats who had walked in the courts of warlords. All were called to bear arms, holocrons, and hope to the front. Corrin Tal, no longer apprentice but knight in training, felt the force boil in his veins as he boarded the Odyssey's Light, a stout cruiser bound for Korriban's orbit. Yana Sol stood at his side, her eyes hardened by choice. "Remember," she whispered, placing the ancient Sith tome into his pack. "Knowledge without compassion is cruelty. Use it to heal or—" She pressed a hand to his breast, and the blade of her lightsaber sprang to pale blue in that gesture, illuminating her determined features. They arrived above Korriban's barren red expanse just as a blood moon rose. Below them, citadels woven of black stone glimmered with molten veins of kyber. A storm brewed in the Force, electric, laced with hunger. Knights leapt into drop shuttles, dispatching squads to breach subterranean vaults. There, in catacombs older than any written record, they found not only Sith holocrons, but the mangled remnants of Theron Ellerin's abandoned experiments. Crystalline husks that once held living beings, oozing ichor that seemed to pulse with rhythmic life. Battle erupted in echoing corridors. Blaster fire ricocheted against hollow-laced walls, and lightsaber arcs carved through shadow like living runes. Corrin closed his eyes, breathing in the Force's currents, feeling the pain of every tortured spirit that clung to the crystal husks across the universe. With a single push, He sent a wave of living force that shattered his enemies' shields, freeing prisoners of their own fears, but each victory tasted of sorrow. Freed holocrons shattered, blackened runes bleeding into dust, freed minds soiled by nightmares too terrible to name. At dawn, the glow of twin suns revealed the true cost. Fields of shattered crystal glittered like malevolent starlight. Jedi lay wounded amid the debris. Sith acolytes either fled or surrendered, their eyes distant and hollow. In the central chamber, where Vorlix had held court, the High Lord was gone, vanished as though never there, leaving behind only scorch marks and a single obsidian shard etched with his challenge. When darkness bleeds, the light will choke. As the Jedi gathered survivors and catalogued what remained, Master Rendis stepped before the shattered rune. "We have faced the darkness," she intoned, voice echoing in the chamber's vaults, "and we have not fallen. But this war is not won. It is neither ours nor theirs alone. It is a struggle within every heart. We must carry these lessons home, that knowledge demands responsibility, that balance requires humility, that peace is forged in compassion." The ships lifted from Korriban's red dust, bearing Jedi, liberated holocrons, and the battered but unbroken spirit of an order tested as never before. They carried with them the knowledge of horrors they would never unsee, and the vow to face the 100-year darkness not as a tyranny from which to flee, but as a truth to transform them. And so the centuries turned, each marked by a new remembrance of what it meant to be Jedi. The darkness beyond the stars was formidable, but the darkness within could be even greater. To master it, the Jedi would learn. They must first master themselves. Thus closed the 100-year darkness, a testament etched in crystal and courage, ensuring that the Jedi would emerge tempered by trial, ready to stand once more as guardians of a galaxy forever on the edge of light and shadow. Chapter 5: The Great Hyperspace War. When the Jedi returned from Korriban's scarlet wastes, the Order bore fresh scars, both on flesh and spirit, but the galaxy itself had not paused in its own wounds. Beyond the Republic's borders, far into the unknown regions, a shadow empire had grown. It was the Sith reborn, no longer scattered exiles, but an organized force under Naga Sado, whose name had become legend among traders and pirates, who whispered of fleets emerging from uncharted hypersystems lanes to raise entire star systems. It began quietly. A mining colony near the Palamian trade route vanished without distress call. A diplomatic envoy en route to establish relations with the mysterious world of Arcania never arrived. Ships patrolling the frontier found only twisted wreckage, as though titanic creatures had chewed them whole. Panic rippled through the Senate. Whispers of Sith resurgence, once dismissed as myth, gained currency. On Coruscant, the Jedi Council met in urgent conclave, the scarlet shard from Korriban displayed on a pedestal beneath the high dome. Grandmaster Yoda's ancient eyes narrowed as he felt the Force shudder with distant malice. "Strong the dark side grows beyond sight," he intoned. "We cannot let the Republic stand alone." Reinforcements were mobilized. Jedi starfighters streaked into the Outer Rim, escorting convoys, training planetary militias, and seeking evidence of the Sith. But the enemy was elusive. Sith vessels materialized in hyperspace corridors that, until moments before, lay dormant. They struck swiftly, leaving no survivors, no transmissions, no debris. Only void. Their flagship, the Nagantine, bristled with weapon batteries that fired beams of crimson energy, slicing through shields like steel through chiffon. The war officially began when Sada's legates declared his claim. He was Emperor of the Sith, inheritor of a heritage older than the Republic itself, and he demanded dominion over all worlds where the Force flowed. Republic envoys were executed before their own senates. Jedi who attempted rescue found themselves surrounded by vessels cloaked in darkness. In the Jedi's first major engagement, the Battle of Deniba, thousands of starfighters danced in tangled geometries amid swirling gas clouds. Jedi Knights led squadrons, weaving between turbolaser salvos, their green and blue lightsabers carving through pursuing fighters in zero-G as if in miniature duels. Knight Arvel Kryno, a lithe technician-turned-warrior, coaxed her battered craft through the wreckage, guiding survivors to safety even as explosions ruptured nearby hulls. When her engine failed, she jettisoned the canopy, stepped into the void, and ignited her saber, deflecting a drifting mine back toward an enemy corvette. Her sacrifice saved an entire squadron and became a symbol of the Jedi's unwavering devotion. Even as victories and losses matched in tragic balance, the Council realized that purely defensive actions would not suffice. Under the guidance of Master Odo Yelmar, fresh from his pilgrimage to the Crystal World, the Jedi devised a daring plan to strike directly at the Sith heart. Intelligence pointed to Inara, a barren moon shrouded in iron storms, as the site of a colossal Sith foundry, where slaves forged crimson kyber shards into weapons of ruin. A task force was assembled, 10 Republic cruisers, 20 Jedi starfighters, and a ground force led by Masters Alice Rendis and Corintal. The mission: destroy the foundry before Sadao could expand his arsenal and rally more systems to his cause. They slipped past Sith patrols by guiding their ships through an uncharted ion eddy, an unstable corridor through hyperspace. The journey rattled nerves as sensors glitched and shipboard lights flickered. Countless ancestors' warnings echoed through the Force, a reminder that tampering with unknown spatial currents invited peril. Yet, at Yelmar's urging, the Jedi pressed on, knowing the risks were dwarfed by the stakes. As the task force emerged into real space above Yenara, cyclones of electrical storms raged across an ashen desert. Below, the foundry's black spires jutted like broken ribs, and rivers of molten kyber stained the valleys in veins of angry red. Republic guns opened fire. Shields on the Sith bastion flared but held. Sith lords in crimson robes strode along catwalks high above ground, igniting blade tips that shimmered like drops of blood. On the field, speeder bikers escorted slave laborers in shackles, driven by armored Sith sentinels. The ground assault, led by Rendis, moved with precise purpose. Jedi formed shields of Force energy to protect workers as they withdrew. Others channeled blasts of pure living force to topple machinery. Tal, lightsaber humming in his grasp, faced a towering Sith juggernaut whose serrated blade crackled with tortured echo. Each parry sent jolts of pain through the knight's arms. With a final surge of clarity, he seized the juggernaut's momentum and flung him into a wall of superheated crystal, shattering armor and resolve alike. Above, Jedi starfighters tore through interception wings, weaving through torrents of lightning-lit clouds. Yelmar's flagship, the Sundered Light, dove at the foundry's primary conduit, firing its deflector cannon to collapse the building's pylons. A massive explosion lit the sky, a flare of hope that streaked across the war-torn heavens. For a moment, triumph shone. But Sado was not so easily broken. From the wreckage, he emerged aboard a personal vessel shaped like a coiling serpent, laughing with cold disdain. His voice crackled over comm channels. "Fools! You destroy one forge only to feed the fires of my vengeance. I am ancient. I am eternal. You cannot kill what endures beyond time." He vanished into hyperspace, leaving devastation in his wake. The Republic task force, crippled but unbowed, limped away, bearing survivors and captured kyber fragments. Yelmar convened the captains and Jedi leaders in the battered war room, the foundry's explosions still pulsing on the screens. "We have dealt him a blow, but this war will not be won by might alone," he said. "We must find the source of his power, trace it back through the currents of time, and uncover the root of the Sith's hidden strength." Thus a new phase of the war began. While fleets skirmished across hundreds of star systems, Jedi scholars delved into ancient archives, seeking clues in the emptiest corners of the galaxy. Some scoured myths of the Great Planar Convergence, a phenomenon hinted to amplify the dark side. Others pursued legends of the lost city of Voroxis, said to house untold power. Through triumphs and tragedies, the defense of Corellia, the liberation of Mon Cala, the fall of Cathar. The Jedi discovered that Sadow's empire was built not on raw aggression alone, but on secrets buried before the dawn of recorded history, rituals that bathed kyber crystals in pure hatred, holocrons encoded with chants that twisted light into shadow. The war became a race against time. The longer the Sith held these secrets, the closer they came to overwhelming the Republic in a final, unstoppable surge. And so, as star systems burned and hope flickered in fractured pockets, the Jedi realized a sobering truth. Victory would not come from conquering the enemy's ships or killing its generals, but from uprooting the ancient darkness that fed the Sith's eternal flame. In this cosmic duel, every blade stroke, every force whisper, every moment of compassion or clarity could tip the scales. The Great Hyperspace War was not merely a clash of armies. It was a crucible that would test the very essence of the Jedi, forcing them to confront the boundaries of their own faith and the lengths they would go to protect the light. In the storm-lashed skies above 1,000,000 worlds, the battle raged on. Its outcome unwritten, its stakes nothing less than the fate of the galaxy and the living force itself. Chapter 6: Darth Bane and the Rule of Two. The echoes of the Great Hyperspace War lingered long after the final pulse of the Nagantine's engines faded into the void. Worlds bore the scars. Cratered landscapes, shattered fleets, and displaced populations who whispered stories of Jedi valor and Sith terror in the same breath. Amid this fragile peace, the Jedi Order drew together its splintered ranks, rebuilding enclaves and reassessing its ancient tenets. Yet even as they healed, a darker transformation was unfolding in hidden corners of the galaxy, one that would forever reshape the balance of power in the Force. On Ruizan, the trench world where the final bastion of the ancient Sith had fallen, small bands of Jedi and Republic soldiers remained to secure the fallen battleground. Beneath a blood-red sky streaked with ash, Master Odo Yelmar led a contingent charged with dismantling residual force traps and collecting surviving holocrons. They moved warily through blasted temples and collapsed corridors, ever mindful that the dark energies seeping from the planet's core bore a hatred older than memory. It was there, in those silent catacombs, that Odo first sensed a presence unlike any he had encountered. It was not the raw, sprawling aggression of Naga Sado, nor the calculated malice of Vorlix. This presence was singular, potent, and restrained. Across the threshold of a shattered chamber, Odo felt a taut tension, as though a coiled spring lay in wait. Drawing his lightsaber, he entered the ruin and found a lone figure, gaunt, hooded, and unassuming beneath a swirling motes of ash. The stranger spoke in a voice that rolled like distant thunder. "You have done well, Jedi, to purge the old gods of hate from this world." He paused, tilting his head as though studying Odo's thoughts. "Yet you fight a war of attrition against shadows. The true enemy thrives in the void between your blows." Odo's grip tightened on his saber. "Who are you?" "I am no one, and yet everything," the hooded figure replied. He knelt by a shattered holocron, piecing fragments with delicate calloused fingers. "I was once a Jedi, much like you." Pain flickered across his hidden face. "My name is Bane." Word of Darth Bane's arrival rippled through the Order like a shockwave. Arrest orders were dispatched. Jedi Knights converged from every quadrant to apprehend this self-proclaimed exile. Yet each time they arrived, they found only empty halls and lingering echoes. A whispered lesson in the Force, a single obsidian holocron inscribed with a cryptic diagram, or, most chilling of all, a meditation chamber sealed from within, as though its occupant had folded into the very walls. Bane's teachings spread paradoxically as rumor and revelation. The countless Siths who had fought over power generation after generation, only to collapse in endless infighting, had themselves ensured the Sith's downfall. Their numbers, so many masters and apprentices, had sown discord among their ranks, poisoning any chance of true triumph. Bane preached a new doctrine, the rule of two. For master to embody power, he proclaimed in hidden gatherings, one apprentice to crave it, no more, no less. In this restraint lies our strength." These words, distilled like a perfect kyber shard, resonated deeply within pockets of disillusioned Sith acolytes. They met in secret shrines on distant moons and long-forgotten temple worlds, swearing fealty to the new creed. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council grappled with the unsettling prospect that a Sith rebirth was taking shape, not as a sprawling empire, but as a silent whisper shared between two souls. In the days that followed, the Jedi redoubled their efforts against known Sith threats, believing that Naga Sado's legacy in the hundred-year darkness had been the Order's greatest tests. But as conflict burned around them, in skirmishes on scattered rim worlds and negotiations in Senate chambers, a subtler battle unfolded in every Jedi's mind. The fear that the Sith had learned from their mistakes, evolving into a shadow that could never be crushed by force alone. Master Alice Rendis convened a private council, inviting Odo Yelmer, Corrin Tal, and several other trusted knights to Valar's garden ring. Beneath the silverwood canopy, she laid out the fragments of Bane's obsidian holocron. "He seeks to reshape the Sith in secrecy," she said, voice low. "If he succeeds, the galaxy will face not a horde of Sith, but the cunning and patience of two relentless minds, passing knowledge in whispered succession." Horan's brow furrowed. "How can we strike an enemy we cannot see? Every time we think we've found Bane or his apprentice, they vanish. Their strength is their invisibility." Odo placed a hand on the holocron's edge. "Then we must turn the tide by choosing our own path. We cannot eradicate the dark. They are as much part of the Force as we are. But we can ensure that neither darkness nor light gains absolute dominance." In that moment, the Jedi forged an unspoken vow to adapt, to study not only the light but the tides of the Force in their entirety, and to cultivate resilience against shadow. They recognized that Bane's rule of two, though sinister in origin, bore a ruthless logic born of failure. If the Jedi were to endure, they too would need the discipline to discern when to wield power and when to yield to wisdom. Yet the true turning point came when rumors spread of Bane's final confrontation with the last of the old Sith. In the caverns of the Hyperspace system, beneath crystalline stalactites that hummed with ambient energies, he had lured countless Sith assassins into a tomb lined with ancient traps. One by one they fell, betrayed by each other's covetous hearts and ensnared by lethal mechanisms. When the dust settled, only Bane remained, breathing over the bodies of his slain brethren. Emerging into the light, he raised his blade to the sky and spoke a vow that echoed across every hyperspace channel. "From this hour, the Sith shall endure not by numbers, but by purpose. The rule of two ensures that only the worthy will learn the secrets of darkness, and only the relentless will wield them." With those words, a new lineage of Sith began. Two at a time they would navigate the shadows, cultivating patience that spanned centuries. Masters would teach apprentices in hidden sanctuaries, imparting only the lessons necessary for survival and domination. When an apprentice grew strong enough to challenge the master, a duel would decide the transfer of power, ensuring that only the most cunning would ascend. The Jedi, watching these ripples in the Force, understood that their vigilance could not lag. The galaxy was vast. Even the most disciplined temple could not hope to track two individuals moving through 10,000 star systems. Instead, they turned inward, refining their own teachings to guard against secret seduction. They expanded their studies of the living Force, including techniques of heightened awareness, emotional balance, and foresight. They also honored the cosmic force, forging rituals that anchored their spirits to the will of the universe. In hidden alcoves and remote hermitages, Jedi scribes added new entries to the archives, on the nature of silent ambition, on infiltrating the heart of fear, on transcending the seduction of power. The lessons were designed not to foster arrogance, but to immunize Jedi against the allure of forbidden strength. As decades unfurled, the galaxy knew neither peace nor open war, but a tense equilibrium. Sith whispers drifted through dark currents, seeking recruits in war-torn worlds and corruptible hearts. Jedi shadows moved alongside, guarding, healing, and learning. In the in-between spaces, nebulae where sensors failed, worlds shunned by both Republic and Empire, the rule of two played out in secret master-apprentice duels, holocrons exchanged under moonlight, and pacts sworn in the absence of witnesses. The legacy of Darth Bane endured not as a blaze of conquest, but as a subtle undercurrent shaping the fates of all who touched the Force. For in that delicate dance between master and apprentice, the galaxy's greatest guardians and its darkest architects would find that the true struggle was never between armies of light and hordes of shadow. It was the war for each individual soul, waged behind closed doors and felt only by the Force itself. And so, even as Jedi enclaves thrived on distant moons and Sith cults gathered in the depths of uncharted space, both orders existed in a tenuous balance, a testament to the enduring mystery of the Force and to the knowledge that power, once tasted, never truly slips away. Chapter 7. The Rise of the Chosen One. Generations passed, and the galaxy spun on beneath its tapestry of stars, each world carrying echoes of the ancient war between light and darkness. The Jedi thrived across the inner rim and core worlds, their temples like beacons of serenity amidst a republic that was growing weary. The Sith, bound to Darth Bane's rule of two, had become as specters, one master, one apprentice, ever hidden, ever patient. Neither Jedi nor Sith could yet claim victory, for the war had long since ceased to be one of armies. It had become a war of legacy, of destiny. On Coruscant, the Jedi Temple stood tall against the golden glow of dawn. Towering spires pierced the clouds, each housing sanctums for meditation, lightsaber training, and deep communion with the Force. In the grand hall of archives, knowledge from thousands of worlds was stored, encrypted in holocrons and etched in crystals harvested from the Kyber caverns of Jeddah. Jedi masters from across the galaxy studied here, and among their ranks was a prophet, the venerable Master Yoda, now nearing 900 years old, still vigilant, still watching. He had long sensed it, a presence in the Force, distant and undefined yet growing brighter, a convergence, a tremor, a balancing point. The Jedi High Council had debated it in hushed tones over decades. The ancient prophecy of a chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. Some considered it symbolic, others a misinterpretation of archaic Force traditions. But the Force itself seemed to be drawing taut, like a string near breaking. Sith activity had dwindled to whispers and rumors, but it had not ceased. Someone was coming. On the distant desert world of Tatooine, far from Coruscant's silver towers and the trade routes of the core, the wind howled across sands that remembered the tread of long-dead Rakatan overlords. Amid rusted salvage and sun-bleached domes, a boy was born to a slave woman. His name was Anakin Skywalker. There was no father. Shmi Skywalker's testimony, when relayed years later to Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, shook the Council. Anakin was strong in the Force, stronger than any living being Qui-Gon had encountered. His reflexes, even as a child, were preternatural. He dreamed of stars and ships he had never seen. He felt things before they happened, and when tested by the Jedi, his midi-chlorian count, the controversial biological indicators of Force sensitivity, surpassed even that of Master Yoda. Qui-Gon believed utterly and fiercely that this was the chosen one. The Council, cautious and uneasy, refused to train him. The boy was too old, too fearful, too unpredictable. Yoda, sensing danger, voiced deep reservations. "Clouded, this boy's future is," he said. But Qui-Gon, ever the maverick, had defied the Council before. He saw in Anakin not only power, but destiny, and when he fell at the hands of Darth Maul, Sith assassin and apprentice to the hidden Darth Sidious, his dying wish was that Obi-Wan Kenobi take the boy as his Padawan. And so the Order, reluctantly, allowed the training to proceed. The years that followed were turbulent. Anakin rose quickly, his power blooming like wildfire. He was brave, loyal, brilliant in battle, but prideful, passionate. He formed deep bonds, most of all with Padme Amidala, a senator and former queen. Their love was secret, forbidden by Jedi Code, but undeniable. Obi-Wan sensed the danger but could not reach the boy's deeper struggles. Anakin wanted to save everyone, to control fate itself. He had never known security, and so he clung to love with desperate strength. Meanwhile, Darth Sidious, known in the Senate as Chancellor Palpatine, watched with calculated patience. He had orchestrated wars, pitted systems against each other, and slowly turned the galaxy's desperation into a plea for order. He became the guiding voice in Anakin's life, feeding him subtle poison. The Jedi don't trust you. They fear your power. I can show you how to save Padme from death. The final fall came during the Clone Wars, engineered by Sidious, fought by Jedi, and seeded with betrayal. Anakin, terrified of losing Padme, haunted by visions of her death, turned to the dark side. He became Darth Vader. It was the ultimate tragedy of the Jedi, that their attempt to prevent the rise of darkness had helped forge its vessel. Order 66 was issued. The clones, once loyal soldiers of the Republic, turned on their Jedi generals in a single galactic heartbeat. Lightsabers clashed with blasters, temples burned. On Coruscant, younglings died beneath the same domes where their dreams had once been shaped. Only a few Jedi survived: Obi-Wan, Yoda, Ahsoka Tano, and scattered others. Anakin, clad in black armor, became the Emperor's enforcer, his saber the executioner of the last remnants of light. But the prophecy was not yet complete. For even in the abyss of Darth Vader's soul, something endured, a flicker of doubt, a memory of love. The Force, patient as the stars, was not finished. It would take decades. It would take rebellion, hope, and the arrival of Anakin's son, Luke Skywalker, for the final choice to be made. But the moment would come. Amid the throne room of the second Death Star, as Palpatine loomed over Luke, laughing with pure malice, Vader would rise. He would seize the Emperor and cast him into darkness, sacrificing himself to save his son. In that final act of love, of redemption, balance was restored. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, fulfilled the prophecy. Not through domination, not through power, but through a single selfless decision. And in the silence that followed, the Force stirred, lighter, clearer than it had been in centuries. The war between Jedi and Sith, begun in ancient temples and on forgotten worlds, had reached its quiet crescendo. But the story would not end there, because the Force, eternal and ever-changing, flows through all things. And wherever life rises, on sand-blasted outposts, in towering cities, or deep among the stars, the Jedi will be needed, guardians of peace, servants of balance, keepers of the flame. For as long as there is darkness, there will be light, and for as long as there is hope, the Jedi will endure. Chapter 8. The Ashes of the Empire. The fall of the Empire brought a hush to the galaxy, like the moment after a storm when the winds finally cease and only the sound of breath remains. The second Death Star was gone, the Emperor cast into the abyss by the very hand he had corrupted, and with him Darth Vader perished. Anakin Skywalker reborn in his final moment, his soul redeemed by the very love he had tried to destroy. But the Jedi were not reborn with him, not yet. The galaxy did not erupt in peace. The Empire did not vanish in a single explosion. Its admirals, governors, and warlords clung to the embers of power like carrion. Civil war fractured the stars once more, pitting remnants of imperial might against the fledgling New Republic. In this interregnum, amid chaos and reconstruction, the memory of the Jedi remained a whisper, noble, tragic, extinct. Luke Skywalker, the last of the Jedi, bore the burden of legacy. The twin suns of Tatooine still burned in his mind, the same ones he had stared into as a boy, dreaming of adventure. Now he walked the wreckage of a broken order, the survivor of not only Palpatine's schemes, but of centuries of war, prophecy, and pride. He could not rebuild the Jedi as they had been. He had seen their downfall. The Council, for all its wisdom, had grown rigid. Their detachment had become blindness. Their doctrine, once pure, had left no space for love, for fear, for the very things that made Jedi human. Luke began his search humbly, not in the heart of the Republic, but on distant worlds where the Force still breathed wild and untamed. On Ossus he uncovered the shattered ruins of the Great Library, scattered by Sith saboteurs long ago. Among its ashes he found fragments of pre-Republic texts, poems from the Dai Bendu, sigils from the early Tythonian enclaves, and half-corrupted recordings from masters who had lived 10,000 years before Coruscant had been named. He listened, he meditated, he walked alone, just as the first Jedi once had, and from the silence came understanding. The Force was not a rule to be enforced. It was a living current. Balance did not mean rejection of passion, but harmony between strength and serenity, between self and others. The Jedi must evolve or perish again. Luke returned to the stars. With Leia's support, herself strong in the Force, though bound by duty to the New Republic, he founded the new Jedi Praxium on Yavin 4, in the overgrown temples once used by the Massassi. Here, under the shadow of ancient stone and amid the songs of wild birds, he gathered Force-sensitive individuals from across the galaxy. His first students were not polished younglings, but misfits, wanderers, survivors. Kip Duran, tormented by his time under imperial slavery. Tion, a bard and law-seeker. Kam Solusar, a redeemed dark-side warrior. They were not the Jedi of old, but they were the beginning. Luke taught them not only lightsaber forms or Force meditation, he taught humility. He spoke of Anakin's fall, of Sidious's cunning, of the cost of pride. Fear, anger, they are not crimes, he told them once as they trained in the stone courtyard, but you must not let them become your compass. Feel them, know them, then let them go. The new Jedi Order grew slowly. 12 students, then 24, missions to aid war-ravaged worlds, peacekeeping in lawless sectors, negotiations in the fractured core. The name Jedi began to inspire hope once more. But not all welcomed their return. From the deep void, beyond the edge of the unknown regions, came new threats. The Imperial remnant, led by warlords like Thrawn, sought to annihilate the Jedi before they could rise again. Rogue Force sects emerged, some warped by Sith teachings, others seeking to twist the new order into weapons of conquest. And always in the corners of his dreams, Luke felt a presence, a wound in the Force, something that had survived death, hatred and fire, a shadow that should have ended with Vader and Sidious but endured. It had no name, not yet, but its echo came from the same darkness that had birthed the Sith. In response, Luke deepened his quest for knowledge. He travelled to Dagobah, to Ahch-To, to Jeddah. He stood in the mirror caves where ancient Jedi had once faced their truest fears. He began to record what he had learned, not as commandments, but as stories, myths, truths written in parable, not code. And he warned his students, "The Force is vast. What we know is a ripple upon its sea. Never believe that our way is the only way." It was an order unlike any before. One rooted in tradition yet fluid. One that accepted the individuality of its members. Luke's Jedi did not forbid attachment. They taught responsibility. They did not demand isolation. They encouraged introspection. They were protectors, explorers, and above all, seekers of balance. Still, not all paths led to light. Some, like Duran, wavered, seduced by the ease of power, the promise of vengeance. There were betrayals, losses. One temple was destroyed in a surprise attack by a rogue faction of dark side cultists. Several students died. Luke himself bore the guilt like a mantle. Yet he did not retreat into dogma. He did not rebuild walls. Instead, he taught the survivors what true Jedi strength was. Not the power to destroy, but the strength to endure, to heal, to choose peace, even when wrath was easier. The ashes of the Empire settled, the new Republic stood, and the Jedi, reborn in new form, once again served as guardians, not of order imposed by decree, but of harmony nurtured through understanding. But deep in the unknown regions, where hyperspace paths twisted into madness and stars blinked like half-forgotten memories, a new darkness stirred. It bore no crimson banners, it wore no mask of empire, but it would test the Jedi in ways even the Sith had not. And once again the future of the Order would fall upon a single choice, made by one who walked both light and shadow. But while Luke had begun the restoration, the Force had not yet finished its work. The legacy of the Jedi was not merely survival, it was transformation. And the galaxy was not done transforming. Chapter 9. The Fall of the Temple. In the tranquil twilight of the New Republic, Luke Skywalker's Jedi Praxium stood as a symbol of rebirth. Nestled beneath the vine-choked ruins of Yavin 4's ancient temples, it echoed with laughter, the hum of training sabers, and the quiet rustle of parchment as students pored over relics of long-forgotten lore. These were not the Jedi of old, stern guardians clad in uniform robes. They were curious, hopeful, sometimes flawed, but they were Jedi, and they were growing. Among them was a boy named Ben Solo. He was powerful. Too powerful. The son of Leia Organa and Han Solo, he carried legacies deeper than blood. Skywalker, Organa, Amidala, and Vader. 4 lines of destiny wound into his veins, and the Force surrounded him like a tempest, just waiting to be unleashed. Luke felt it from the start. The crackle of energy, the unsettling echoes of emotion buried too deep. Ben was distant from the other students. Talented, yes. Gifted beyond doubt, but he walked in 2 worlds. Where others struggled to feel the Force, it leapt to his command. But the cost was pressure, expectation, fear. Luke tried to shield him. He taught Ben quietly, carefully, sometimes away from the others. He revealed pieces of Anakin's story, filtered through compassion and caution, but the shadow of Vader was a weight too heavy to omit. Ben's conflict festered. In dreams he heard voices, not his masters but others, hollow, hissing, ancient, promises of power, whispers that he was being lied to, that his potential was feared, and from the unknown regions, something heard him. In the cold reaches of wild space, the remnants of Palpatine's contingency stirred. Hidden in darkness aboard a vessel not registered in any Republic archives, the Sith Eternal thrived in silence. They had not died with the Emperor, they had waited. Cloned, broken, resurrected in spirit if not flesh. Palpatine's consciousness festered in fragments. Not alive, not dead, but present. Watching, manipulating, he reached out to Ben, not as Palpatine, but as Snoke, a voice of understanding, a presence in the dark, a figure of strength when all others offered only restraint. Luke felt it, a darkness creeping into the soul of his nephew. He meditated deeply, searching for clarity, and then, in a moment of weakness and fear, he saw a vision, a galaxy consumed in flame, Ben at its center, cloaked in shadow, and Luke ignited his saber. Just for a heartbeat, just a moment. Not to strike, but to stop what he feared could come. But Ben woke, saw the blade, and everything shattered, in terror, in betrayal, in fury. The temple burned. What happened that night became myth almost instantly. Some said Ben slaughtered his fellow students, others that he left with a handful, twisting them into the Knights of Ren. Some believed he spared many, fleeing in confusion, but the outcome was the same. The new Jedi Order, Luke's great hope, was gone. Luke searched, fought, grieved, and finally he vanished. To the galaxy, it was abandonment. To Leia, it was heartbreak. To Rey, years later, it would become the unanswered question of her youth. But to Luke, it was penance. He journeyed to the first Jedi temple, the island of Ahch-To, where the Order had begun, a place older than any archive, whose stone huts were etched with carvings of the prime Jedi, a lone figure encircled by both light and shadow, balanced perfectly. Here, Luke faced himself, his choices, his failure. He sealed away the Jedi texts, refused the call to train again. He drank the milk of Thala sirens, fished from the sea, and waited for the Force to forget him. But the Force does not forget. It moves, grows, and one day a girl arrived, a scavenger from Jakku, strong in the Force, bearing a saber that once belonged to Anakin and then to Luke. She brought news of war, of a rising First Order, of Snoke, of Kylo Ren, Ben Solo reborn in fury and conflict. She brought a plea: the galaxy needs the Jedi. But Luke, bitter and broken, refused. "It's time for the Jedi to end," he said. He told her of failure, of hypocrisy, of hubris. He recounted the fall of his order, the burden of legacy, and the never-ending cycle of Jedi and Sith destroying each other. He feared training her. He feared her, her power, her questions, her hope. But she persisted. She learned from him even as he turned away. She discovered the texts. She connected to the Force herself, without permission, without structure, and when she faced darkness in the island's ancient mirror cave, she returned, unbroken. She was not him. She was something new. Luke began to understand. The Jedi had always adapted, from Tython to Ossus, from Coruscant to Yavin. The Order had never been perfect, but their purpose was noble. Their mistakes did not mean their mission was meaningless. The galaxy needed light, not dogma, not pride, just those willing to stand between others and the dark. So when Kylo Ren destroyed the Resistance outpost on Crait and cornered the last spark of hope, Luke Skywalker returned, not in body, but in spirit. He projected himself across the stars, a feat no Jedi had ever performed on such a scale. He stood before Kylo Ren, a phantom of the Jedi he once was, and gave the Resistance time to escape. He gave the galaxy time to breathe. And then he passed, his final act one of peace, not violence, a Jedi not of conquest, but of sacrifice. Watching the twin suns set one last time. The legend was reborn, and in Rey the path forward remained open. Not a recreation of the past, but a reclamation of what mattered: courage, compassion, connection. The Jedi would return, not as an army, but as a promise, that the light would never fade, even if it flickered, even if it failed, it would always rise again. For that is what the Jedi are: hope made flesh. And in the next chapter of the Force, hope had found its bearer. Chapter 10. The Rise of the Last Jedi. The death of Luke Skywalker sent ripples through the Force, not as a wound like the fall of Anakin Skywalker, nor as an echo of fury like the death of Sidious. Luke's passing was quiet, like the hush of wind through ancient trees. His body vanished into the Force, as his master Obi-Wan's had, and his soul joined the lineage of Jedi who had transcended death, becoming something more. But in the galaxy, the storm raged on. The First Order pressed its advantage. With the New Republic shattered and the Resistance reduced to embers, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren led a reign of terror through the stars. His Knights of Ren burned through opposition, and the old Imperial war machine found renewed life under his rage. Yet, even as he ruled, Ben Solo's soul writhed beneath the weight of his choices. Rey, orphan scavenger of Jakku, stood alone. Luke had refused to train her fully. She had learned pieces, fragments of the Jedi Code, whispers of the old teachings, but most of all she had learned that her strength came not from lineage, but from her choice to stand against the dark. Still, the past haunted her. On the wreckage of the second Death Star, she faced a truth she had tried to bury. She was a Palpatine, granddaughter of the Sith Lord himself. The Emperor had survived in twisted form, hidden on the dark world of Exegol, where Sith cultists had preserved his broken body and voice, keeping him alive through unnatural means. He offered her the galaxy. "Strike me down," he hissed, "and your journey will be complete." His voice was the same that had seduced Anakin, that had whispered through Snoke, that had corrupted the Republic from within. But Rey did not choose that path. She reached through the Force and called to the Jedi of old, and they answered. Voices from across time, Yoda, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, Luminara, Kanan Jarrus and others, rose like a chorus within her. "We stand behind you. Let it guide you. Rise, Rey." In that moment, she became not the descendant of Palpatine, but the heir to the... She deflected the Emperor's lightning, turning his own fury back upon him, ending his lineage not with hate, but with resistance, not with vengeance, but with resolve. The Sith died with him. Rey fell, drained, nearly dead, but Ben Solo, reborn through sacrifice and love, saved her. He gave his life to heal her, completing his redemption in a single act of selflessness. And so 2 lineages ended, the Sith and the Skywalkers, but the Jedi remained. Rey buried Luke's and Leia's lightsabers on Tatooine, in the sands where both had begun. She forged her own, golden, built from the staff she had carried as a scavenger, not Anakin's, not anyone else's. Her own. When a stranger asked her name, she paused, then looked toward the horizon, where the spirits of Luke and Leia smiled upon her. "Rey Skywalker," she said. "Not by blood, but by choice. Not born into legacy, but choosing to carry it." Chapter 11. A New Dawn. Peace returned, as it always does after war, but it was fragile, delicate. Worlds slowly emerged from the shadow of the First Order. The Resistance, now heroes, laid down arms and became stewards of renewal. And Rey's last Jedi of the old, first Jedi of the new, set forth to rebuild what had once been lost. She did not create a temple on Coruscant or Yavin 4. Instead, she traveled from world to world, learning from the ruins, listening to survivors, finding Force sensitives, not to indoctrinate, but to guide. Her teachings were not rules, but reflections. She found a child on Corellia who could move metal without touching it, a blind girl on Pantora who saw through the Force, a boy on Naboo who heard voices in the rain. She offered them not control, but understanding. Not a code, but a question. What will you do with this gift? Rey's Jedi Order grew, but not in secret nor in grandeur. It grew in story, in example, in healing. She meditated on Arcto. She spoke to Luke's spirit when the wind was still. She read the ancient texts and found wisdom, not perfection. Some Jedi lived in cities, mediating disputes. Some wandered, healers and seekers. Some trained in Rey's quiet camp beneath the twin moons of a forgotten Outer Rim world. There were no ranks, no titles, no temples filled with marble and fear. There were lightsabers, yes, but also music, art, agriculture, teaching. The Force was not a weapon, it was a way of being. And yet, Rey knew darkness would return, not in the form of the Sith, perhaps, but in grief, in pride, in ignorance, as it always did. So she taught her students the truth that Luke had forgotten, that the Jedi of the Clone Wars had missed. The Jedi are not above others, they serve. They listen, they feel. The golden saber at her side was not a badge of power, it was a reminder of duty. Chapter 12. Echoes in the Force. The Jedi have risen and fallen countless times. From the mystics of Tython, to the warriors of Ossus, to the knights of the Republic, to the exiles who survived Order 66, their story is one of change. They are not a single code, not a council, not a temple. They are an idea, a promise, that light will endure, that balance can be chosen, that even in the face of overwhelming shadow, one can stand and say no further. The Force continues to speak, in whispers across the stars, in the dreams of children not yet born, in the rustling of leaves and the quiet between breaths. And when the dark rises again, and it will, the Jedi will return. Not because they are flawless, but because the galaxy needs them, not to rule, but to remind us that compassion is strength, that selflessness is power, and that even the smallest spark can light the stars. For as long as there are those willing to listen to the Force, the Jedi will never truly fall.